We are doing a Web3 Gaming Roundtable digging into the topic, the big question, is Web3 gaming cooked? And brought in a couple of our internal Web3 growth experts, Jerry and Matt. What's up, guys? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us.
We also have to include our resident crypto hater and skeptic, Xander, who is going to be joining us as well to help dance on the grave of some of these games. I thought maybe to start, let's take a look at the charts. I feel like there's a pattern going on, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Here's the chart for Illuvium. Let's see, this is the chart for Dimensionals, Genesis Stones. Here's the chart for Shrapnel's Shrap Token. And I think we had one more. Oh yeah, we'll throw one old school one on here. Here is the chart for the Sandbox. I feel like there's like a pattern, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Do you guys see any kind of pattern with these crypto gaming tokens?
They're not doing well.
I don't think they're doing so well. So I wanted to bring the guys in today because there seems to be a bit of a theme, and I want to unpack if it's just me assembling a narrative or if there's actually kind of a moment that we're going through. So the last couple weeks, and I apologize to our normie listeners who don't follow any of this weird crypto stuff, but the last couple of weeks, there's been a couple of big stories within Web3 gaming of what I would call kind of the chosen ones of the last cycle. Some of these really well-funded, really hyped games that have all had kind of rough news coming out and kind of community turning against them in different ways. So, a couple of stories that prompted this episode. We saw the Dimensionals project get a ton of blowback. That is the team from Mino Games, which we worked with them, full disclosure, on their Web2 games in the past. They had made a launch of an NFT set for this game, Dimensionals. They ended up kind of backing away from Web3 and trying to just launch as a fully traditional game on Steam and got a ton of blowback. I mean, there's a ton of kind of controversy in the space between them and Web3 right now. That was the first story. The second one was there has been a lot of drama on the Shrapnel team side. We're friends with a lot of folks there, awesome people on the team, but there's a lot of legal turmoil, founders suing co-founders from what I understand, key personnel are leaving or rumored to be leaving, and a lot of turmoil there. And then the last kind of big moment that I think happened the last 3 weeks is Illuvium had the simultaneous global launch of their 3 games that they've been building the last several years, and they've hit like a thud. The reviews have been horrible. They're kind of getting mocked across the gaming communities, and a ton of blowback after all the hype leading up to these. So kind of these 3 big stories around Dimensionals, Shrapnel, and Illuvium. Guys, is there a coincidence that all these things are hitting at the same time, these big games from the last cycle? Are there themes to these? Are we cooked in Web3 gaming? Matt, if you want to start us here, what are your thoughts on this current moment and these trends and stories that we're seeing?
Yeah, first of all, I like to comment on the macro. I would say on the macro, most Web3 gaming tokens are on the downward trend, but specifically with the 3 projects that you just mentioned, starting with Dimensionals, they all have their own turmoil and their own essentially, what actually happened in particular with each project. With Dimensionals, I think is, the easiest one to essentially call, I'm not sure what term other people would use, but a lot of people have used, they essentially rugged, right, in Web3 and just kind of exited the market and are going into Web2. I'm not sure if you guys agree with that or not. Personally, I minted the Dimensionals NFT. A friend of mine was an advisor and he gave me a whitelist and I never sold. I think I forget now if it was 1 ETH or 2 ETH when it initially minted. And, I hold the projects that I believe in, even if it means that they go to 0. But to be fair to me, it was a free mint, right? So I didn't pay anything. I'll probably be a little bit angrier if I bought, at 1 or 2 ETH back when it minted.
I might have been in that later bucket, Matt. I might have bought it off secondary.
So you might feel a little bit different if you paid a few $1,000s for an asset that now essentially does nothing, right? And will never do anything because, the team decided that they just don't want to do anything with Web3 anymore. And to be honest, I'll give them that they did try to do a buyback. The thing is, apparently it was, behind the scenes and, only certain people knew about it. I certainly never knew about it. And yeah, in the final message in the Discord, they kind of just announced, let everyone know that the buyback refunds had gone out, and then they deleted the Discord 10 minutes later. So I didn't even see that announcement either. That one I think is the most particular, and the people have a lot of emotions around that, especially a lot of the holders, I would say, understandable. And then for Shrapnel, the way that I feel about that one is I think definitely, it's not a great look when a lot of very integral parts of the team leave. A lot of the executive team, people with a lot of pedigree, it's not always a great look. But, from what I can tell, the people that remained within the company, which is still a very big company, they're still trying to do the best they can to continue building the game, market the game, etc. Obviously, I cannot comment on the legal stuff. I did not watch, for example, CryptoStash's video. He went on the full legal case and breakdown on that. But I know that, with, any company going through something like that is also something that will affect the token or the, perceived price of an asset within a certain time frame, especially since the lawsuit actually pertains the token. But yeah, and lastly, Illuvium. I think for me, I never even dove into that ecosystem, but I always thought the game looked great. My 2 cents on that was I did always know about the friction that you had to get into a playtest to play the game. They never really had an easy way for people to kind of get in and jump in. And I think lately there was a lot of people talking about a lot of tweets, posts, etc. Just from people just genuinely just trying to play the game, being like $50 deep just to get into the first phase of the game. And I think that's honestly, in a world where you want people to play your game and you want to break into the market, how can, after paying $50, how can you still not be in the game? That's completely unacceptable. And I think the team should really grab their current strategy and kind of reconsider into letting people in. But yeah, those are kind of like my high level thoughts on each of the games.
Yeah, absolutely. And just of note, we're friendly with a lot of teams in the space. Like Sash from Mino, he's a friend. We did a lot of work with him. I would love, Sash, if you're listening to this, I would love to have you back on and kind of dissect this from your standpoint. But yeah, I mean, maybe I'll hold off on my own thoughts there. But Jerry, before going to that, same thing with Shrapnel, by the way. Like the awesome people on that team, we've had them on the podcast before, and we know folks at the Illuvium team. Jerry, what are your thoughts on the 3 projects that kind of, were the impetus for this episode? Do you think there's any common themes between them or anything that you think is notable about each of what any of them are going through?
I think there's one really common theme within those 3, and that's that I don't feel like any of them actually knew how they wanted to approach the blockchain elements of it, and thus they're in trouble now with the Web3 community because they didn't really know what that approach was. And I think Dimensionals is a really good example. We know Sash. I've met him, I think you guys worked with him before my time at Uptick. I've met him. I really enjoyed every interaction I've had with him, but it just seemed to me very clear that Dimensionals didn't really have a plan for what do these assets or items mean, and how do we turn that into something valuable for everybody that everybody can be happy about and get behind, right? I think Shrapnel is the same way. I think, they released things really early, and then they released a token really early as well, way before their game is ready. And we've all probably played the game at this point, and it feels okay for what it is, which is a really early alpha game, but that's not going to be ready for a couple more years, right? And Illuvium, kind of the same thing, games that just feel halfway done. And Illuvium to me feels like a really beautiful world that is fun to run around in, but it's got nothing that keeps you there. It doesn't have a lot of substance to it, right? But these people all have, stakeholders in now, with whether that's asset, NFT owners or token holders that want to see things happen on a better time frame because they don't understand that these things just take forever and most of them are going to fail anyway. So you are beholden to things that are deeper than just building out your game, right? If you're Shrapnel, you're beholden to trying to affect the token price in any way that you can. So much of your budget goes to how do we impact this? How do we get this on people's radar rather than how do we just make our game to get millions of people playing it? And once you're in that position, you can't put things back in Pandora's box, right? Once it's open, it's all out there. And I think that common thing has led to all of them being in the positions that they're in. And you see on the other side of that, teams that have known exactly how they want to approach blockchain from day one are not in these issues. They're not having these problems, and people are still championing them and have a lot of grace towards them and are giving them time. But because that vision has been clear from day one and it hasn't wavered. And I think for all 3, there's a lot of wavering, and it's like anybody, right? When you show kind of some cracks, people are going to start to ask a lot of questions, and all those teams showed a lot of cracks.
Yeah, so Jerry, you touched on a very important theme to, I think, dig a little deeper there, which is in all of these cases, the Web3 asset came to market well before the game did. And that is kind of a precedent that we have in Web3 gaming. And honestly, I think it's a fairly toxic one, but one that has had to exist in order to be a liquidity mechanism for funding these projects, either through VCs or through direct sales to the community. Do we think that this is ever going to work? Do we think this ever has worked to date in a sustainable way? Or is this sort of a phase that we're going through as we discover what is the sustainable phase of Web3 gaming? Other than Xander, I think at least that the other three of us think there is some sustainable pace for Web3 gaming, and I'm kind of trolling Xander. Yeah, it feels like we haven't found it yet. I don't know, Xander, maybe you want to start on this one? Like, why do you think this model keeps failing?
Well, I think just to quickly touch on the last topic, I mean, I think we're running into the fact that game design is hard. And I mean, we work on a lot of games, do a lot of game launches, and we see 19 out of 20 fail. And so I think, if we're using that as a sort of benchmark, we got 14 more to go or whatever, 17 more to go before we're going to get a hit. But that being said, I think my question, and I'll sort of throw it back to you guys, is Web3 a mechanism for funding game companies, or is it a game design mechanic? And that's sort of the main question. I think so far it's been a mechanism for funding game design. And Joey, you alluded to a lot of the problems with that, is that you have your stakeholders that are not your game players who you are beholden to. And that's really, really dangerous when you're trying to do something that's already really hard, which is design a game. And so I think the question I'd say is like, which one is it? And can we find a way to loop in the monetization mechanics of Web3 into actual game design? And if so, who's doing it well?
Yeah, I think it has been a monetization method, right? A new way to monetize people. And I think that's one of the core reasons why a lot of the Web3 projects are in the state that they're in, right? Is because GDC this year, I talked to a lot of people, both Web2 and Web3, and like the thing that Web2 people were really excited about is like, oh my God, we can make money way earlier than we ever could in our games. Like, some of these games, like if we're all at Supercell or a company like that, like some of these games don't make it past the incubation phase, or like the 4 dudes sitting in a conference room with a whiteboard, like ideating out a game. Like a lot of these games would not have made it past that, but because they were in Web3, they got millions of dollars and then they just failed anyway, right? So it has been a fundraising mechanism and a way to monetize at really high, user values in an earlier way. But it needs to be a gameplay mechanic or something that's core to your game or your ecosystem that couldn't exist without blockchain, right? And I think the teams that do really well all have another common theme, which is this game could not exist without blockchain. This game could not exist without player ownership or asset ownership in the games, right? And those teams, like Wildcard, the guys, the poster behind me, they're this team, right? This game could not work without them having the ability to have, that initial golden cohort, right, early on in the building out of the game, and it's an enhancement tool or a better retention tool. So it's been one thing, but it needs to be the other. And I think we've finally seen, the fundraising model of Web3 starting to break in a pretty drastic way. And I think most teams will shift, but it's hard because you can't tack things on afterwards. And that's what Illuvium felt like to me, is that it felt like a game that somebody wanted to make a Web 2 version of something with ownership on top of it. And then they went, oh, we got to tack on a ton of different things on top of that, and we don't really know how to do that. And those projects are all just going to be doomed in time.
Yeah, Illuvium is, to me, kind of a wild case the more I learned about the history of the project. And I followed kind of like while they're in their initial boom cycle, and it was kind of the story of the token, but realizing that like the leadership, from my understanding, had not shipped a game previously, and they chose to ship 3 games simultaneously, all launching on the same day, which would be wild. Like that would be wild for Blizzard. That would be wild for like the most experienced developer. But for a first-time developer, to Xander's point of like the hit rate of games, to divide your resources, no matter, you could have infinite resources, but just the complexity of 3 different games with different models, different economies, one was mobile, you were leaving so many variables to fail. And that's like the scary thing about game development, is like, it only takes one thing to go wrong. I haven't played Dimensionals yet. It might be a fantastic game, but the way they handled the relationship with Web3 might have sabotaged them, because it might have cut off that lane. And Web3 stuff is still toxic to traditional gamers, so it might have cut off that lane, because now they have like this aura of them, of like, though there was NFT stuff in the game, right? Everything about the game might be perfect other than that. I don't know. And it's the same thing with Shrapnel. Like, even if they solve everything for the game side, there may be other steps that they've taken. If you ruin your economy because you launch your token too soon, there's just so much that can go wrong.
Warren, you're very pragmatic. You're much more logical than I am, and I think I run more emotionally than than most people at Uptick. It's not just wild to try to launch 3 games. Like a Blizzard or a Sony or a Microsoft, the people who are the most capable at shipping games do like 1 a year, right? And these guys try to do 3 on the same
What
day.
are we?
That is
4 years, right?
Yeah.
1 year, way less than 1 year.
Absolutely insane. Yeah, and I think that's just such a crazy thing to try to pull off. And I think it goes back to like in 2020 and 2021, everybody was so euphoric from like the crypto boom cycle that nobody paused for a second and thought like, ooh, that's a lot to do. And yeah, and I think the thing, I don't love the game that Dimensionals is, but a lot of people that I know really enjoy it. It's just kind of not the right genre for me. But what I fear is that you have enemies on both sides of the aisle now, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Web2 people don't like you because you had NFTs, you had blockchain, and now the Web3 people don't like you because you tuned your back on them in a pretty drastic way. So you're kind of in this no man's land, and that's a really scary place to be because the game, by all accounts, is actually pretty solid. So, to maybe have that be something that could fail just because you upset a bunch of people along the way really sucks for that team.
Yeah, to go back to the original question, Sander, I think since 2021, there was a lot of teams that they did see Web3 as a, almost like a life hack to raise and to start building their games. And one of the things that I learned over the years, especially 2021, 2022, is that, there were some studios that essentially, I'm not sure how, but they got introduced to Web3. They were told, all you have to do is launch an NFT, then you'll have a community that will support you forever. And, they'll just, keep buying everything that you put out. And I think that the piece that they missed from that was that, and this was the major disconnect. And I know this because I used to be a community manager for one of these games, right? The reason a lot of the communities were doing this and, just buying your NFT at a mint, for like a high price and then even pumping it beyond that was because they thought that they were truly going to be owners and sharing in the revenues and future profits of the game. But then all these developers were like, no, it was never going to be this way, right? So as soon as that happened, those games crumbled and the communities crumbled and they basically didn't see any support, right? And then, of course, back in 2021, there was a lot of euphoria. So the tokens and NFTs coming out before even any products were out here, it could still happen. Fast forward 3 years and, everyone's gotten a lot smarter. Both the consumers, I guess the VCs as well, because they gave money that they should have never given to some other teams back then, because they basically were never going to build anything. And I think even game developers as well, right? They just know better. So I think the main issue with that is that I think, when it comes to now having a token or releasing a token without a good product, it's just never going to work. And yes, of course, some people are really good at still selling you the dream and having a really successful TGE. But there's a lot of these founders and even some agencies, not naming any names, that will literally just have a plan up until TGE. So they'll do an amazing marketing campaign, but it ends at the TGE and then radio silence. So what do you think is going to happen to the price of the token as soon as they start talking about it? It's just going to go to zero, right? Eventually.
Yep.
Yeah, the only way forward, right, is to now flip the script. Right? Because this fake hype or whatever, it only lasts so long. So the only way forward is to actually come out with a product. And then eventually the product or the game, because the product is the game that finally has like a breakthrough and, gets 1 million players, 2 million players, 5 million players. Then people will be like, oh my God, this is the one. Let me see the token. Boom. So now it has to be the other way around because look, we even saw, and and I have to say this, and I'm a holder of the other side, Yuga. They raised how many hundreds of millions of dollars? Was it 300, 400 million? Turns out a few years later that people are saying Yuga is like, is going to be one of the most valuable companies in the world. Turns out that they got lucky because, so far they've done nothing. So yeah, like, I'm sorry, Garga, if you see this for some reason, but yeah, turns out you guys got lucky. And, that's what made you the number one, right? Right place, right time. But so far, we're still waiting on something. And I am rooting for you guys at the end of the day. But, actions speak louder than words, right? And that's basically what I always say. So, yeah, I'm still holding the other side lead, my land. And I'm hoping we get a good game eventually. But as so far, the price just keeps going down. So.
Before we go further, I just want to kind of put a bullet on like the level of this euphoria. Like I was just doing some calculations in the background here. For the Illuvium, which I think is one of the more extreme cases, like at the peak, the token price was, over $1,700 per token. So I think it's down over 98% now. It's like $37 now. But their fully diluted market cap near the peak, if my math is right, was around $11.6 billion for a game that didn't exist yet, which is absolutely insane to think about. It felt crazy at the time, but in hindsight, it just seems truly insane. But I think like that's part of what allowed that kind of mania to exist in that era is like it really, on the positive side, I think part of why we've all kind of caught the fever within building in Web3, like it does open up lanes for things you can do that you can do with gaming before, like new ways you can design economies, player engagement, new types of user acquisition. Like there is something real there that keeps those of us that stay in the space excited, but it's really overshadowed by all of these horror stories and subpar products that come to market.
What can you do with Web3 that you can't do with other games? So far, what I've seen, everything else you can do with the traditional game. So interoperability being the one example that I've seen that I can actually believe is something that doesn't exist. Is that it? We're all putting all our eggs in the interoperability basket? What's the game design mechanism that's new?
Question, Xander. I mean, Jerry, do you want to start here? You talked about what you like about Wildcard and the ways that they're leveraging Web3, and you mentioned you think they're doing some game design stuff that like you just couldn't do or is made better by Web3. So yeah, any specific examples?
I think the one of the things, and this is not a Wildcard unique thing, I don't think, and I don't know if they have plans for this, but like when I was on like studios and helping ship games in Web3, thing I always got really excited by was like dynamic NFTs and things like that. And just like that was somebody who like bought and sold accounts in like World of Warcraft back in the day, helped get me through the few years of college I did go to. And I think just like the embrace of that is something like me as like a now older dude would be willing to just like buy accounts to skip things and not have to like grind to level 60 again. Like, please spare me from ever having to
But you could
go
do
through
that
that again.
You can just go buy an account from Blizzard now, right?
Yeah, now, yeah. I'll have to reach out to the Wildcard guys and see if we can get them on here so they can talk about it. So I don't watch what they're attempting to do. But yeah, I think for them, it's about establishing who your most ardent supporters are going to be very early, having record of those things, and then being able to use blockchain as a mechanism to further enhance like their game experience, right? So, and there's a lot of ways that you can do that. I mean, I'm not at all like in game design, so I want to let those guys speak to that more than I try to like impart what I think they should be doing on. Yeah, maybe Matt, you've seen some like good teams kind of offer some of those things out.
Let's be honest, guys. I would love to sell all my League of Legends skins, that I spent like a few $1,000s on over the years, and probably more than I'd be willing to admit. Of course, there are Web2 games where you can sell your skins, like in CS:GO. I don't think it's gonna happen anytime soon for some of like the bigger titles like Fortnite, etc., etc. It's a really good question, and in a way, it's like a catch-22 because I actually got to speak to a really, really good game designer a few years ago, and he was telling me, I always liked crypto, and he was telling me that he was into crypto since like 2011, 2012. And he was telling me, but I haven't found a way why gaming needs crypto. It doesn't need it, but it can definitely improve certain efficiencies and things like that. The only thing I'll say is that for sure, like it should always be in the background. Like players should never need to know that something is like an NFT or it's like on a blockchain. So a good example of this recently is Off the Grid, right? Off the Grid is currently, I believe, in closed alpha or beta, but it works on consoles. So they have it on like the PlayStation. I'm not sure if it's on Xbox, but yeah, so they have it on consoles. It's on PC as well. It's under NDA. But what I'll say about it is this, while players are playing the game and they're unlocking in-game skins and things like that, the Avalanche, their subnet is just printing transactions and that's basically awesome, right? Because essentially all these players are unlocking like on-chain assets and they don't even know about it. They'll never need to know about it. And, when we play our normal games, we don't care like what a cloud service is hosting our games, right? So I think when it comes to that, for me, that will always be like the actual use case, which is like something in the background. The players don't need to worry about it. And, hey, if you go down the rabbit hole and you figure out that your account or your skins are worth something, isn't that a good thing? Yes.
Totally.
Who would say no to that? So yeah, that's basically how I see it.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and I actually would say I've not identified things that you literally can't do if you have infinite budget and infinite dev resources that Web3 allows you to do. Not saying they aren't there, just like there's not any that have like jumped out to me. I actually position the value prop a little differently. We talk a lot about that. One thing we're really excited about as technology advances is how like lean, smart game dev teams can do more with like very bare bones resources. Technically, yes, like any game company could build their own marketplace for trading things. You could use like player accounts to trade from. You could obviously build your own economic layers, your own account management systems. The value that I see for Web3 is kind of like these open source, very proven, almost like an SDK that you can plug in that gives you all of this proven infrastructure that can let a lean team all of a sudden have an economic layer where those players can like buy and sell the game pieces on a proven, secure marketplace where they can like have an account abstraction layer mapped to wallets. Like the players don't need to know that it's wallets, but it's sort of like all of these things that like, yeah, technically if you're Blizzard and you have like 500 developers. You can build all these things in-house and you can replicate them. But we now have these things that are proven at scale that give you these important layers for gameplay and game economies and account management. And I think that's like the near-term value proposition of what these Web3 layers bring to gaming.
Yeah, I mean, when you said the thing that I was going to say, it's like, so to be clear, I like the promise of Web3 a lot, right? I spend a lot of money on video games, like too much. I would love to own my assets. I would love to trade my assets. I think that's all really good. But the point I was trying to ask about is like, what is the thing that makes it uniquely possible in Web3? And we sort of talked through that. I don't need to re-articulate it. You could do it. Some games do it right now with CSGO. I think the thing that's really going to drive adoption for me is like you need a critical mass of like demand from player demand. You guys all know this. We're going to need a couple big hits to sort of push the market that way. And long term, it's going to be really good for the market if we push towards this. It'd be good for players. The thing that, Warren, to your point, it's not clear to me that this is actually easier than doing it a different way. And like maybe over time that it will become, but right now it's not. And so we'll see. I'm not saying I love Web3. I would love for this to be mainstream. It's just, what is the thing that's unique about Web3 that makes this the way that games need to move? And to be clear, I hope it does.
I mean, I think we did a good job. Well, I don't know if a good job, but we at least spent some time dissecting what went wrong with this last cycle of these games that are kind of struggling, that had these immense raises. I kind of want to look at like who's still standing and what does the next phase look like. So maybe breaking that into two parts. Like, what are the games that raised, and I roughly, I don't know if you guys agree, but I kind of roughly think of like three eras of Web3 games. The first being like CryptoKitties, Axie, Gods Unchained, maybe Sandbox in that category. And then the second being this crop that we're talking about now that raised in like 2021, 2022. And now we're kind of entering this third crop that learned from those first two. Firstly, do you guys kind of agree with that framing that like we're kind of like in the second era of Web3 games coming to market? And who is still standing from, those that raised a few years ago? Like one that stands out to me is Big Time. I think they've found some ways to sustain and make a product that seems to be poised for survival. But what are the projects still standing from this last phase?
I think two real big success stories that one we talk about a lot and one we don't talk about enough. Star Atlas, I think, is a huge one. Obviously they're like a giant company that went from basically zero to selling like $150 million in ships. They're for people who don't know who Star Atlas is, they're a Star Citizen, like very grand vision project. Yeah, they went from not existing to like selling, 150 million, like 200 million in revenue in like their first year, which is insane, off of just a vision and, some art that was shown. And they had a really crazy story. They got involved in the FTX saga. I think they, got pretty hurt there. And
yeah, they kind of had to rebuild, right? After that.
Yeah. They managed to stay afloat and, managed to now they're getting ready to go to market with, a few of their titles, and they've built out like exactly what they set out to do, a huge world that has a bunch of different things you can do in it. I played it at Rare Evo. It was all single player, multiplayer's not built in yet, but it's coming in like the next few months. And it was all like really well done and really fun. And people were staying at the booth for, a while to just start to play the game and then want to get better at the game. Like they'd had a pod racer type thing. And I think they're in such a good position. I think they're kind of like the antediluvium. They always knew what they wanted to do and they stuck to that through adversity that would have made people fall apart. I don't know how the guy still has hair with like hearing some of the story that he went through. So I think for them, that's a clear one. And then for the second, it's Ronin and it's Axie. Yeah. And it might not be the game that is Axie, because I think that is in a still very weird spot. And I think, who knows? I wouldn't be surprised at Axie having a huge resurgence. I also wouldn't be surprised at Axie being shut down any day. But the Ronin team took those learnings from Axie and just started to publish games and started to help games get from 0 to 1. And that's the hardest thing in Web3. I think what we've seen in Web3 is going from 0 to 1 is incredibly difficult when it comes to shipping your game, right? It's easy to sell assets. It's easy to raise a couple $1 million. It's easy to sell $1 million in NFTs. But then getting the game out there and getting people to actually care about it is really difficult. And now you see Ronin taking concentrated bets on teams that they believe in, that they believe have a good product behind them, right? So they're doing that with Pixels, and that was a huge success and still continues to be a really big success and have a lot of people playing Pixels. I think they're doing a really good job with Machines Arena, which is like a top-down shooter on Epic Game Store.
So recently signed Forgotten Runeverse, which is a game team that we've supported with a game that I'm really excited about. But Yeah, I mean, they not to cut you off, Jerry, but I think it's worth elaborating. Like, they recognized what they did great and then figured out how to turn that into a replicable model. And because they, in the same way that they were first with a lot of these innovations on the gaming side, when we had Kathleen on from Ronin a while back, but we really think they're building at least the early stages of what does Web3 publishing look like. And it's such a blue sky right now that they're able to basically get all of the most promising games. Like, for a lot of folks, like, because they've seen what Ronin does to the game signing, it can often be like their first choice as they're considering options. So it's a really interesting lane they've carved for themselves right now.
Ronin, and Axie had that stigma of being like this tier 3 play to earn, company, but they've broken out of that too, right? Now people are interested in just the games that they're signing on. And, I think they're always going to have that interest from like the kind of tier 3 geos that want to have like some of the play to earn mechanics within games, but they've completely broken out of that. And now they're getting people interested in Ronin just as a vehicle for looking at, are good games still building? And as soon as Ronin attaches their name to somebody, it's a huge level up for that team. Mm-hmm. And so they've completely broken out of like the stigmas that they were getting kind of stuck in, and they're doing a great job of it.
Yeah, no, I was just going to comment on that. I got to finally meet a good friend of mine. He's the other half of the BD team at Ronin, Ash. So it's Ash and Kathleen, and they're essentially the gatekeepers into the Ronin ecosystem. So they're the ones that meet with all the games. And one of the things that he told me is that like they lead with wanting to play the game. They're not like, like, oh yeah, let's see your white paper. What are you building? No, they want the product. Ronin wants a product.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So that's number one for them, right? And second to that is, their traction, because that's like a really early sign of success for a game. If you have a playable product and there's some traction in terms of community, player base, daily active users, etc. So that's one of the things that I admire them. Like Fresco said, they used to be like the play to earn, and I think they were evolved into almost becoming a bit of like a publisher in a way, or maybe they're heading towards that. And I think in the future, if they continue signing on hits and games that are successes, I could see them probably being like a fairly successful Web3 gaming launcher, right? It was one of the topics the other day that Sam was talking about. But yeah, on my side, I wanted to give a shout out to kind of like some of the new era games, as Warren was saying, and I have three in mind.
It's a good segue.
Yeah, which is games that actually don't have a token out yet, but they have a game and they're kind of building the game in public. So the first one is King of Destiny. They really are in tune with the Web3 community. And to this day, they don't have a token out there. They're building towards it, but, it almost seems like one of their benchmarks was to hit like 1 million downloads, and they're well into their way there. So shout out to Brian, Owen, Rich, etc. It's a team that we have worked with closely, and they know what they're doing. They were at GDC at the Wolves, and, super experienced team in Web 2 and mobile games, but also in Web 3. The second team is Fableborn. Again, they don't have a token out. They're building towards that, but before that, they have put in an incredible amount of job work into their game. I think they've scrapped their game like 4, 5, 6 times now, and made like a new playable. So at the moment, I think they're doing really well. I think they published their numbers today, the last playtest, which lasted about 2 weeks, out over 100,000 players, which is great. They won retention 85%, something like that. It is a part of a play to airdrop campaign, but it is a very fun game, having played it myself. So, I'm kind of excited for them as well as they progress and keep building the game. And the last one is they have a token out now, but it came out this year, and it's Pirate Nation. That team did incredibly well at essentially having a playable game 4 months before their token came out. And, they had an incredibly successful TGE, and the community was really happy with it. And, I think if you were to put that token compared to a lot of the other charts that you showed earlier, you'll see that chart looks a lot better, probably. Those are my three picks and shout outs.
Yeah, those are good ones to call out. And I'd love, Jerry, I want to get your picks for the current crop as well. But I think one thing that comes to mind is you're touching on those, Matt, like for each of them, the token did not launch before the game. For 2 of them, the token still hasn't launched. I would posit not every game needs a token, but we'll leave that can of worms for later. Importantly, 2 of those are mobile apps. And that's something where I think for the first and even second crop of gaming, it was less of an available lane because policy had not really evolved with the app and Play Store and with the typical user acquisition networks for mobile. We know here at Uptick that like mobile is like the platform for, if you want the biggest audience possible, you ship to mobile. If you want the most cost-effective user acquisition, you ship to mobile. So to me, that's another theme with like this third era is like they now have a set of rules in which they can engage the mobile gaming ecosystem, which is just the biggest part of current gaming, the biggest audience. So yeah, Jerry, I would love your thoughts. Like, who do you like in this kind of third era of gaming? who are the teams that you think might actually, make it out alive from this crop?
Yeah, that's a team I'm insanely bullish on. I think Pirate Nation, you can't discredit like what they've done. It has been I think an expertly done token launch, and just I think since they hit the scene, they've done everything the right way. Beyond a couple of those that we've talked about already, I think Parallel is really exciting because they continue to just grow as a game, and I think there are guys that we all know pretty well on that team and understand where they are and understand where they need to be to continue to grow in the TCG space, right? And Warren, maybe I'll let you touch more on that because you are actually a TCG player. But I also think that they're just doing, in a way, Xander, we're talking about things that couldn't exist without blockchain, right? Parallel Colony, I think, to me as somebody who's who plays games, is really exciting the way they're implementing like blockchain plus AI. It's kind of like this unique like 1.5 player game where you don't really play the game as much as you just guide your AI agent around and building out their own colony, right? So you're kind of playing alongside an AI agent, and I think it's just one of the more unique things I've seen somebody try to do. And I love that unique take on a new genre of game that doesn't really exist is happening, within blockchain. So yeah, Parallel for all the things that they're doing, and the second one would be Off the Grid. I think Matt touched on them a little bit earlier, but a lot of their stuff is behind NDA right now, so people aren't talking about it. I think I'm in the playtest. I don't know, Matt, if you are. Everybody I've talked to who has played it has loved the game, right? I haven't heard anybody say that they didn't like it yet. Everybody's comfortable to say that like I would play this over Fortnite, or I would play this over Apex, or I'd play this over COD, right? So
interesting.
It's a really, really well done game that everybody's liking and is going to hit, PC. It's already on PC, but it's hitting consoles. Not sure how they're handling like blockchain and marketplace, on console. If I'd imagine they're doing it like off console and you have to go through a website, connect an account and all that
off
stuff.
Off the grid.
There we go. Warren, the puns are getting better. But yeah, everybody, it's just universally, seems to be that everybody loves it, and everybody is enjoying playing it. And yeah, I think a game that can actually start to make that crossover into pulling people who don't know anything about blockchain into it.
Well, I want to do a hard pivot from that to actually, Xander, I'm going to go to you here, because one other related area of Web3 tangential games that has been booming lately has been Telegram games. And Xander, I'm actually going to go to you first here. I think you dug into Hamster Combat this week. What are your thoughts on Telegram games?
Dug in is a very generous word for what I did. I booted up Hamster Combat. I clicked like get a coin like 10 times and then I rage quit and we'll never go back. It's interesting because we always follow any new emerging trend, right? And so for us, we're like, we got to give it a try. It seems like this is probably just like hype, right? And then we're just like going after vanity metrics in order to raise fundraising. That's what it seems like to me, but I don't know. Did you guys play Hamster Combat? Did I miss something? Is it actually good? And I'm just don't understand what's going on.
No, but I used to play Cookie Clicker when I was younger. I'm not sure if you guys have played it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
I actually don't think, but maybe there's like something deeper in there. Telegram games are really interesting. Just really quick one before we move on. I think I want to just like re-articulate what you guys said at the last section. One, it's really interesting to hear what you guys said through all those because I have a homework list and I can go check out all those games and I'm really excited to check them all out. But two, the thing that is most important is you're actually talking about things that are unique that you can only do with Web3, and that is what makes them exciting. And I mean, we don't need to rehash it all, but I think that's the kind of key point is that they're doing stuff that's unique, and that's the cool part.
I'm just curious, do you guys think that the segment has legs? Like, I kind of agree with Xander. I think it's mostly like a device for tricking VCs by saying like, look, the game's only a month old and we have 5 million players with no marketing spend, so give us the next round.
Yeah, they're leveraging Telegram numbers, just to gamify everything, I suppose. But yeah, it's as far as I can tell, they're all clickers. I even opted into one that looks like Pokemon, so it looks very similar because, I'm a Pokemon fanboy. But yeah, no, it doesn't seem like it can go past like just tapping the screen into, actual gameplay or something like that. Maybe there's developers cooking something better, but as far as I can tell, I think the fad will die down as soon as people stop making money from the supposed airdrops that people are farming for, because they're also very bottable, right? Just clicking. I think I've seen already a few screenshots of like 64 phone screens on a monitor and people just farming, hard at work farming. But yeah, so I think as soon as people clock on that there's not much money to be made, I think the fad will die down. That's my
Are people making money
theory
right now? Are they doing airdrops based on this?
Yeah, I think that's the promise, is that like they lead to an airdrop. So, farm away.
I'll call it for what it is, right? what people are doing is they're making a Telegram game. They're attaching an airdrop to it to like juice the numbers of it and get a lot of people into it because they are very simple. And realistically, not only are they simple, they're bottable, right? So everybody can set up a clicker bot to go and play the game and just do whatever you need to do. Maybe you'll make 10 or 20 bucks off it. That's a lot to some people. That's coffee for a week for us, you know? So even that, I mean, I wouldn't complain about that, right? But the ultimate goal is the fundraise for the main IP, right? So when you juice the easy low lift thing, you can then say, we had 3 million people play this. They love our IP. And it's like, nobody cares about your IP. They cared about the $10 to $20 that they were going to get from it. But now you got $6 million from Bitcraft and all these people. I shouldn't name names of VCs. Bitcraft maybe is smarter than that. One would hope. And I do believe that they are. Everybody I know who is interested in Telegram, the games and building them, is also one-to-one a project that hasn't really found product market fit in the Web3 space yet, and is wanting to find some sort of product market fit so they can keep the lights on. And I can't blame them for that, but I also don't think it's sustainable. And also, I don't know if Telegram's going to exist in 6 months with the CEO just getting arrested. And, you know, it could fundamentally and foundationally look much different depending on how that whole case goes. And that's in France's hand now, you know. But Telegram could be not where Web3 is housed in a few months' time.
Yeah, and you touched on a very important thing there, Jerry, which is like, at the end of the day, like a lot of these game teams are not signing up with ill intent. They're trying to survive and ship games. And so if they see a path to liquidity, sometimes that can start liquidity for fundraising. That can start potentially a series of cascading negative events. So we called out one team that we really like how they're bringing their game to market is the Infinigods team with King of Destiny. And we covered here on the pod a few weeks ago that they actually had one of the larger raises of the last year in gaming too. And I think those two things are directly connected. So part of why they can do that is the pedigree of that team. So I think it's been really hard because of the stigmas in Web3 to go do traditional games fundraising. And so that leads them to participating in the Web3 ecosystem, which demands a token ahead of the launch, which starts this vicious cycle. With the Infinigods team, because of the pedigree of Owen and Rich and Brian on that leadership team, they can do something that other games can't. But maybe that's what it's going to take to break out, is like teams that don't have to rely on these financial components of early stage Web3 gaming that can just ship the game and not have to put the cart before the horse in that way. So maybe that's something that gives us hope for this next crop.
Completely agree. As we may have heard, for some VCs, the token is the product. So when you can actually have the luxury to focus on your game instead of like having to launch a token because, you know, of your term sheet, then then that works sometimes. Yeah, it works better.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks guys for joining for this therapy session. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, this was a good discussion. I think it was cathartic for those of us who maybe been in the Web3 space for the last couple of years. Yeah, to builders out there, I don't know. I think it's pretty clear. Don't release things, 2 years too early, and keep people on your good side for as long as you can.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're all rooting for Web3 gaming. At least I am. So, it's important to point out where things go wrong, and hopefully we can learn from that. There's lessons in that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll agree. I mean, I might sound like a pessimist. I think I'm just skeptical by nature, and I see the potential here, and I really hope, I'm a lover of games. I really hope that we can get there, and I'm excited to go and try a bunch of these games you guys listed to see, how we're doing. And we've said this for many times on the podcast, but it's gonna take a few big hits before this is like the hottest space in the world again. So until we get there.
Xander did ask me about what NFTs he should buy. So recently.
You told me none.
All right.
Oh, no, one.
Well, Jerry, fully accountable for Xander's future financial gains or losses. Thank you guys again for joining, and thank you to all the listeners. As always, the pod was brought to you here by our team at Uptick. You may have heard by now, but here at Uptick, we help games grow. So we do all the full scope work around growth marketing, user acquisition, Web3 native marketing, creative analytics, and all the support functions powered by our Uptick Games Growth platform. So if you are building a cool game, we don't care what kind of technology you're using. You can be Web 3, Web 4, Web 5. It doesn't matter. If the game is cool, we want to help you scale it. And you can reach us through our website. It's uptick.com, upptic.com.
Talk soon.